Welcome back to Heart with me, Shakti Sundari. We're here in the beautiful home studio of Uma Dinsmore-Tuli, who is the author of Yoni Shakti, a book which speaks about feminine power, yoga, and the ancient form of Tantra. So welcome to you, Uma.
Thank you.
Super excited to meet you and be in your space with all these gorgeous paintings behind us. Which are featured, of course, in your book.
Yeah, these
Yoni
are
Shakti.
they're the 10 wisdom goddesses. So you can probably see a few of them in the shop. The Dasha Mahavidyas, the great wisdom goddesses. So they're the structure of the book about Yoni Shakti, about women's power and freedom.
How does, let's go straight into it. So how do these images encapsulate different powers or different siddhis or different aspects of the feminine? So
Well, it depends who you ask, but in this particular set that we've created and in the way that they're structured in Yoni Shakti, each of the 10 relates to a different aspect of women's powers. Some of them are to do with particular times of our lives, and some of them are to do with particular experiences. So for example, Tara is all about menstrual consciousness and menstrual awareness and cyclical wisdom.
So which one's this?
And then top left-hand corner, that's Tara Devi. So, and then the one beneath, that's Kamalatmika, and next to her is Matangi. And they're about the power of creative expression on the left, and about sexual power and delight and everything. She's everything we learn from delight and pleasure, and she's everything we learn from like expressing our truth in our creative forces. And those two are kind of the same. But there's 10 of them, and each one is a different aspect of our powers as women. But that's one way of seeing it. It's not a very orthodox way of looking at it, but that's the way that I've presented them.
So I came to you through your book, Yoni Shakti, which I recently discovered. So grateful to you for that, because it's just pulled together everything that I'm passionate about and want to know more about too. So thank you. For me, it had some quite revolutionary concepts, actually, that reframe narratives in such an empowering and inspiring way. So could you perhaps speak to the central premise of the book?
Okay. So Yoni Shakti, A Woman's Guide to Power and Freedom Through Yoga and Tantra, has a key idea right at the centre of it, and it's expressed in different ways. It's actually like 4 books in one. So there's politics and history, and then there's a lot of spirituality around the goddesses, as well as practice and like practical yoga therapy to do with different stages of women's lives. And each of those 4 aspects is carrying within it this quite radical concept that the huge powers that move through a woman's body at different times in her life, for example, her first period, the connection that we have as we maybe conceive children, or as we move into menopause, the power of the female orgasm, the power of lactation, the power of all of these things that move through our body, are so impressive and so beyond our control, even when we're conscious of them. They're actually things that occur to us. It's power moving through us. That if one observes that from outside of a woman's body, you might be deeply impressed by the fact that, my God, all those women are menstruating together. That's synchronous menstruation. They're bleeding without pain. That, you know, those kinds of witchy sort of experiences and really powerful physical phenomena, I'm asking people to think that, in fact, could have inspired the development of practices to try and get a hold of power. So Hatha Yoga, for example, tries to get hold of the natural flow of energy, the downward flow of energy, and bring it up, and the downward flow of energy and bring it in and up. And all these practices within Hatha Yoga are about honouring power, prana shakti, the power of the life force, and doing technical, practical things with your body and your breath and your bandhas, your locks and seals, to actually manipulate and take charge of that energy so that you live forever and become enlightened, and then you can use that energy for spiritual purposes. So if that's the motivation of Hatha Yoga and meditation, you can see that if those powers of life are moving in their fullest expression, for example, in giving birth, or actually menstrual visioning that happens, then those kind of experiences are a siddhi in themselves. So that there's not there's a parallel between the yogic siddhis, which are the supernatural powers you acquire by doing fierce, disciplined practice to take charge over power. And the female siddhis are about how we take conscious awareness into those experiences that are power moving through us. So that instead, for example, of being totally floored by the menstrual experience, we recognize that as power and we see what that is. Or instead of being totally floored by a massive hot flush that like wipes people out, and it's actually, you see that as the power of Kundalini rising. You recognize these moments and experiences, like the engagement that we can have with, you know, multiple and diverse kinds of orgasmic experience. That's a very feminine encounter with that sexual power. We can say, well, actually, if we look at these in women's bodies, these are siddhis. Not if we just let them unconsciously unfold, but if we consciously bring awareness to them, then they bring us insight, they bring us a kind of initiation into power, and we grow into another kind of wisdom. So that's a kind of, it's like an inner yoga of women. And the inner yoga of women is actually paying attention to the physical body and not trying to the physical body's rhythms and cycles, and not trying to pretend that it doesn't happen, which is kind of what you're asked to do in quite a lot of male yoga traditions. Carry on, do your practice, all is coming, just keep doing the same thing, do what Guruji said, and don't pay no mind to that distracting womanly stuff. And I'm saying, no, 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 actually the distracting womanly stuff is the power. And if you pay attention to that, then you're in a kind of yogic relationship with those powers, because in fact, by honoring those powers, you can really begin to deeply know yourself. And then you get intuitive wisdom and understanding, which is kind of the end goal, although you could argue there is no goal, but of what you're doing with all the yoga practices is to get that kind of insight and wisdom. And our bodies are giving it to us, but we're just taught not to pay any attention to them. Yeah, which is a bit of a shame, really, because they're calling out for us to pay, if we pay attention, to actually gain that kind of wisdom. Yeah. So that's it in a nutshell. So that's sort of at the heart of Yoni Shakti, but there's also all this stuff about like, what can we do with yoga practice to ease the sufferings that might arise around those very powerful experiences? And what can we do if we're experiencing challenges with fertility or menstruation or menopause or whatever it is? We can actually use yoga in a therapeutic way to make life more comfortable and less challenging, but at the same time we can heighten self-awareness. So it's a kind of self-study. Or
it's so brilliant that you've given these techniques that are sort of practically helpful, but as well as again an empowering narrative that reframes all of these aspects of the feminine, which from my perspective, you know, our society and culture has so denigrated and dismissed for so long.
Oh yeah, it's time now.
So say, for example, we were to talk about menarche or menstruation. Yeah. You know, how would you speak about that to a woman?
Well, I just think that part of the speaking about it is that from when little tiny infant baby girls are born, we don't necessarily hide things from them. I know women are like, oh my God, my daughter's nearly 11 and she's going to be menstruating soon, and how do I start talking to her about it? It's kind of too late at that point. I mean, it's never too late, but if there's an open welcome for the fact of being a woman, you grew up around a mother who's clearly menstruating, who's quite clear about her shifts and her needs, and this is when I need to rest, and this is what's occurring, and it's not hidden. Yeah. So if it's not hidden, and the only reason we hide those things is because of shame. Oh, don't let your brother know, don't let the boys at school know, don't let your teacher know, don't let your dad know, don't let anybody know that you do any of these things, that you're in cycle all the time, or that you're having your menopausal experiences. Instead of hiding those away, they become causes of celebration, so that as the girls grow breasts and as they start to change in their shape, there's a celebration of it. So I say the best way to talk about it is open celebration and honouring of massive power, of women's power. And instead of seeing those as weaknesses, we see it as a strength. Instead of seeing it as a curse, you see it as a blessing. You turn the whole thing upside down and say, how did we get in this mess? Because none of that way of looking at stuff is helpful for anyone. These are our blessings.
How does, just playing devil's advocate, how is menstruating or going through the menopause power?
How is it power?
Yeah.
It's power because what happens when a body begins to menstruate is that it comes into its own rhythm, and that rhythm is the rhythm of life. And like anything that's alive and powerful is moving in cycles. you know, the light and the day and the seasons of the year and the tides of the sea and all of these things that move, the creative process, all of these things move in cycles. So when we come into our menstruating years, we come into the rhythm of life. Yeah. That's pure power. And when we come into menopause, we come into a different relationship with that. That's not about like the little moon inside us. It's about the whole world calling us. So there's a sense that we reframe our understanding out of like family or our small little worlds, which have been dictated by the rhythms of the moon inside, like our menstrual cycles. And as we get to menopause, we start becoming who we really are outside of those hormonal cycles and in a kind of world working way. So I honour the work of Alexandra Pope in this way. Her book Wild Power with Shani Hugo is really good on that, you know, because it helps people see that it is wild power, but it's working within us. So that's powerful, isn't it? It's a power to be in proper rhythm so that you can dance with life rather than trying to hold steady and pretend that you're not going to be affected by any of that.
So, yeah. Next question, coming on from that is then, what did you notice with women who are coming to you, to your workshops and your classes? What was presenting? What did you observe? And then what changes have you observed as they've taken up some of your practices?
Oh, okay. That's an interesting question. I mean, what I notice, sometimes I see people one-to-one and I see kind of individual life developments happening and things like, and sometimes I see them in a group. And one of the classic things that happens, even when some people just have even come once or twice, say to a women's yoga class where we're honouring, we do a gesture that honours love, sending love down into the womb, and you're moving this way. Can you just show us that? You're moving from a place of focusing in your heart space where you bring love and thanks and gladness, and then you simply exhale and you send that in the middle of that little triangle, you send it down into your source. So you're moving source energy, vital energy up into the heart, and then you're sending love and thanks and gratitude down into the source, which is a radical act because normally all that down there gets is complaints and shame and difficulty. So if you're working in a class for a couple of hours like that, it is not unusual. In fact, it happens almost every single time that at least one woman in the class who has not menstruated in months, sometimes in years, will go off, she'll disappear. I think, oh, she's gone. She's gone off to the loo and her friends will come off and she hasn't bled in months or she hasn't bled in years sometimes. And this class, it's not just me, it's like bringing her back into connection with her womb and being in the company of sometimes 50 or 60 women where we're doing not just, it's not just that gesture, it's like the intention of it. We also use bhakti yoga, we use song and mantra, and yoga nidra is a huge part of it. I use total yoga nidra in every class. We usually start like that, and I find if people take the time, especially women who are trained never to stop, if we take the time to go inside and rest in total yoga nidra, and then you do classes that allow you to move freely according to what is your need, then actually that awakens all kinds of possibility for change. And that's the key one. I see people's menstrual cycles coming back. And then sometimes I see people who haven't bled in years, like I literally have passed through that. I'm talking about younger women whose cycles have been disrupted, coming back into rhythm and reconnecting with their flow. And then I see older women who perhaps have gone into places where they haven't bled in 2 years or something, and then they're in a circle of women, and that's not just about the yoga, that's about that kind of energy. And then they have a little reminder bleed, and they're quite delighted about it. Or sometimes I see people who've had real difficulties with fertility struggles, or they've had multiple miscarriages, or they've experienced terminations, or, you know, grief and sadness is there in the womb, and actually they're making peace with that. So it's like making peace with ourselves and not having to kind of persecute or punish yourself for being in a woman's body, which is the fundamental stress that all women live under, that somehow we're not quite right. We have to pretend not to be the way we are. And all these classes do, and this work does, is, especially through the yoga nidra, is let you know that you're completely perfect just as you are. You don't have to do anything about it. You just have to let it be. It's there already. You just have to stop fighting. So that's quite important, yeah. It's a bit vague. I don't know if you wanted anything more specific than that.
So basically what you've said is that in your workshops, at least 1 or 2 women will start to bleed as a result, really, of bringing their attention and awareness with love to the womb.
With love in the womb. And they're coming home to themselves. I mean, I always use the same kind of greeting whenever we do yoga nidra. And I have found a lot of people that the work has reached. I haven't met them physically, they've just been listening. We've got loads of free online yoga nidras on the Total Yoga Nidra site, on the Yoga Nidra Network site, and I get mail from people saying they've been listening to this. They can sleep again. They get back into rhythm again. You know,
they just take you back.
Yeah.
That's like a new thing, and that's important as well. So total yoga nidra.
Yeah.
What is this?
Total yoga nidra is what it says. It's like the practice of yoga nidra, but from an experience of its totality. A lot of what happens with yoga nidra is that individual schools get hold of one particular way of doing it, or another way of doing it, or this way of doing it, and so they trademark it and they say this is the way to do it, and don't do it any other way. Guruji says do it like this, and any other way isn't going to work. And that's just not how it is, because really you're working with the power of rest, nidra, Shakti, the power of sleep, the power of repose. And if you work with it in a feminine way, you work with the totality of all of her different aspects. And so that helps boost creativity, it helps people with their menstrual cycles, it helps with menopausal difficulties, it definitely helps people to sleep. That's the most popular download on that site. So I've been very passionate about liberating Nidra Shakti out of all the, you know, I have respect for those traditional forms, but there are many ways to experience Yoga Nidra, and they all are really super for women's health. They really help us. So
I know that we might understand what this is, but for someone watching who doesn't know what Yoga Nidra means.
Oh, it literally means, Nidra means sleep. So Yoga Nidra is like a kind of philosophical joke, because the yogis are the awakened ones. It's awakened into connection. So Yoga Nidra is like the sleep of the yogis, or the yoga which is sleep, or the sleep which is yoga. Effectively, it's the power of repose, a kind of conscious resting in a place where perhaps your body is asleep, but your mind is still conscious and awake. And what happens is your intuitive awareness is really awakened. It's the yoga practice for connecting with intuition, better than anything else, really. I mean, bhakti yoga is important like that, like devotional practices. But because Yoga Nidra is effortless, it means there isn't anything to do, not up here. You're just letting things rest and come to a place of a creative void where things arise in beauty and wisdom. So I think that's really important for women's health, and a lot of the changes that happen if people are putting into practice the techniques I write about in Yoni Shakti, for example, they're using Yoga Nidra. So I don't necessarily have met them, but like I hear from them because they write and tell me that things in their lives have changed for the better, you know.
2 more questions.
Yeah.
So the things that might be creating disturbances in the cycle, or very strong menopausal symptoms, or challenges with fertility. What's your perspective on what that might be, and then how the yogic, the sort of feminine yoga, can help that?
Well, I usually only have one kind of answer to those questions, and it's just, it depends. So there are lots of constitutional differences that cause different kinds of, for example, different menstrual difficulties, depending on your constitutional type and all that kind of thing. But at the bottom, like underpinning all of the difficulties, is a fundamental disconnection, and it's a disconnection from the earth, from the body, a kind of sense that the body is somehow not to be trusted, or is a shameful place, or is a place that has to be punished, or that is there just to carry your brain around. I worked in higher education long enough to realise that some people, just their bodies are just means of carrying their prefrontal cortexes around so they can think complicated thoughts. But fundamentally, when you get to women's health issues, a lot of the things that arise are out of disconnecting from maybe sometimes quite quiet messages that come, like a little bit of a discomfort, or a little bit of a lump, or a little bit of tenderness, and then it gets bigger and bigger. It's almost like, you know, if you're out with a little child in a big shop or something and they want something, they'll just go, can I have that? And they'll make a little cry, and eventually there'll be a massive tantrum, and a lot of, because you've ignored that request. Yeah. So I think in a general sense, there's a sense that if we ignore the cause of the cycles and of our bodies and pretend they don't exist, then they're just going to cause problems, because we're not paying attention. And if we do pay attention and give love and space and honouring to the things that are arising, then things change. Yes. They don't always get better straight away, but things will change. Yes. And then they'll change for the better, because our daughters will see that. And then, you know, I see a lot of young women kind of modelling really positive, inspirational honouring of the earth and of being feminine and being present in in their bodies. So that's a general answer, but it really is very specific.
Yeah, but I get the thing. It's about the awareness of the attention.
Yeah.
And so of course we're talking so much about the feminine power, Shakti, and so another question I have is, can men do these practices, and what is the benefit to men or the masculine of these practices?
It's a good question, and I get asked it quite a lot.
Yeah.
And one way of the answer is yes, that all humans have this Adi Shakti, this primary power, and they're connecting with our earth and our water, which is the places in the body that are the root and the whole of the pelvis, and all of those fluid movements and strength and connection are of value to men. They're really positive in promoting good vitality and positive creativity and a positive connection with sexual energy and about preventive, of issues, prostate issues and things like this. So when I teach to men and women, I usually speak about source power, and that's another way of translating Yoni Shakti. Shakti is power, Yoni is source. So everybody's got a source, and the source of all our power and vitality is the earth and our connection with all of these elements. So it's completely open to men. It's just that I do feel that women benefit from having a little protected space at the minute to do our own thing, which is why I do a lot of women-only work, not because I don't like men or love men or, have sons and a husband and, friends and colleagues. And in fact, it was a very male team that really brought Yoni Shakti into being in lots of ways. There were some good women obviously working there, and it's all women's stories. Yes. But the design team and the illustrating, well, anyway, all men, and the editing, the academic editing as well. So yes is the answer. It's for men as well as women, and I think actually it benefits us both to be both connected with that, because then we're in that relationship with vital source energy.
Of course.
That keeps us well and happy on this planet. Anything
so
else?
Much. Yeah. Well, if I could ask you loads more. I know that you're off to the States soon, so what's next for you? What's your next project?
Well, there's a lot of projects, that's the thing. There's a tour of America and United States and Canada, and then I train a lot of teachers, so yeah. And I've been working on new writings about yoga nidra that spread that awareness in a much more fluid, feminine way. And so, yeah, and lots of recordings. We've been making a lot of audio recordings of wild nidra and Yoni Shakti outside of these kind of studio environments, in the rivers and so it's got lots of bird song and rivers and oceans and wind and all of that. So it's outside in nature, wild nidra. Yeah.
So that will be on your website?
Yep. So there is, you can go to Yoni Shakti and check out all of that amazing work with vital energy and total yoga nidra. So it's the Yoga Nidra Network. The yoganidranetwork.org is where all the free nidras are, and all the training, lots of teacher trainings and foundations all over the place.
Fantastic. We'll put
in the wild and beautiful places, yeah.
And is there anything you'd like to say in conclusion? We always ask our guests if they have a parting message for our viewers.
Yes, I always have the same parting message. It's a really beautiful affirmation, because all of this work, although lots of it seems very heady, like I've thought it through a lot, there's a lot of history and politics, fundamentally the work that actually makes a difference always comes from the heart. So the affirmation that I leave whenever I go anywhere, and the way that this work has come, is that it's come out of great respect and love, honouring my heart, my inner teacher. And as an affirmation, I offer that. It's a way of understanding the Sanskrit mantra Om Namah Shivaya. And you can translate Om Namah Shivaya as, with great respect and love, I honour my heart, my inner teacher. So that's my final word. And it's not my final word, it was a translation I was given by my teacher, Mukunda Stiles. Yeah.
Beautiful. Perfect. Thank
All
you.
right. Okay then. Jai Ma.
Thank you.
Thank you for your interesting questions.
Thank you so much to you, Uma, and thank you so much for watching and being with us today. And join me again next time on Heart to Heart with Yoni Shakti.
Thank you.